All right, everyone. We now welcome on two very, very special guests to the program. We're really excited about this interview. These are two guys who you definitely know around this area. They're Rochester royalty, and if you're a hockey fan, you definitely know them. They both had very, very successful careers, over 1,300 games combined in the National Hockey League. They probably talk more shit than anybody I've met to each other, and we're excited for that today. But without further ado, two of the best guys I've gotten to know in the hockey community, it's Brian and Steven Gionta. Boys, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, fellas, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us on. What's the game breakdown there of the 1,300 games?
I love it.
It's 1,000 to 300. I already know it.
I saw the chuckle from Steven right away. This is going to be fun, guys. And not only are we hoping for people to get something out of this, but this is going to be an absolute riot, knowing you guys both well. And we wanted to bring you guys on for this one. First of all, your time's so valuable, and we're extremely grateful that you guys are taking the time to do this. But as you guys know, this is Chasing Edges. So the goal here is to really try to give people some things that they can do to chase the edges of their goals and objectives. And we've talked about things from sleep to nutrition to training. And what we're going to focus on today are the intangibles. And the intangibles we thought was perfect for you guys to come on, because two of the very best humans I know I've ever personally met. And I think the success you guys have seen in the hockey world and beyond, a lot of that is because of your character and the intangibles. So really, before we kind of get to your story and some things that hopefully you can share with the people listening, what are the intangibles? And it's, me working with a lot of people, high level and, high school kids and everything. It's really that thing that you can't define, right? It's the magic sauce. It's the perfect recipe of character, of edge, like knowing when it's time to have an edge, humility, passion, drive, all of those things where you wish you could bottle and just insert in everybody that you work with. And you guys really define, I think, those things. So, in the hockey community, sometimes we call it jam, where that guy's going to have your back no matter what. But off the ice, they're the person that's opening the door for the old lady going through. So really, we wanted to kind of bring you guys on. And I think a big part of your success is your character. And, I've worked with a lot of people in my day, and you guys are definitely up at the top of that list when it comes to the level athlete, obviously, pretty much as high as it gets with the people that I've worked with. But, talking to a lot of professional athletes, there are times where you're talking to people and it's all about them. Like you just work for them. You're the service provider. You're there to kind of work for them, and they could really care less about you as a person or what's going on. Then I've worked with people that potentially say the right things, but you can tell it's because that's what they should be saying, and it's not potentially wholehearted. But talking to you two guys, I'm not gonna go too far off and on a tangent here, but like talking to you guys really give a shit about people. Like talking to Steven about the kids, like Steven genuinely cares when he asks, like, hey man, how are the kids? Like he really legitimately cares. Like Brian going on like big interviews, like an NHL Network, and wearing a Next Level bucket. Like I know we have sick hats, but like he's doing that on purpose because it helps us out. You know what I mean? And he's just that guy. So what I want to do today is dive into how has, your upbringing kind of developed that intangible that's helped you guys be so successful? And then, how has that played a huge role in your success? So, I know I'm a West Side guy as well. And you guys, it just seems like that, some of that West Side blue collar mentality. I know your parents, I was between you guys growing up playing hockey. I was nowhere near where you guys were, but, your parents are Rochester hockey royalty, and like, that van that I know your dad had and really never missed a game. And like, I guess I want to know a little bit about like, how did your upbringing play a role in who you are today, the intangibles, and how that played a role in your success on and off the ice?
I can start, Stevie. It doesn't matter, but I think it starts obviously with my parents. It starts with how you're raised and kind of the things that you experience in life, right? Like I think all of these things build what you are on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, my dad owned a hardware store, a small mom and pop, Ace Hardware. He had 3 going at one time. So he was constantly juggling. By no means were we, you know, super rich, and by no means were we super poor. But there was times that, you know, he didn't have any money because the stores weren't doing well. And like you said, he's driving out to Colorado, bringing me to a national camp, and he's sleeping in the van all week. I didn't know he was sleeping in the van. He was like, we're going out there. I'll bring you. We have to drive. And then, you know, he stayed in the van. I didn't know that till after. He packed a TV and he slept in the van for a week, coming to every skate at national camp because he didn't have the money for a hotel. He didn't have that extra little bit at the time. And he didn't want to put the burden on me to be worried about that. He wanted me to go out and be able to perform. So little things like that throughout your life that, you know, they're giving everything they had to you. It also wasn't the new age hockey parent, crazed parent. It was love and support. It was, you know, help you, support you, but it wasn't like this craze. We got to be going nonstop. We're getting you every new thing. We're getting you the latest and greatest, you know, fad that's out there. It was basically go out, have fun, play, and I'll support you. I love watching what you do. And I think that's kind of, you know, come back around with me and Stevie with our kids now. It's not about pushing them to be the greatest and best athlete. It's about watching them do something they love to do. And so for me, that's what I get enjoyment out of every night or on the weekends. If I'm traipsing to Tennessee for a soccer tournament or if I'm in Pittsburgh for hockey, it's watching my kids do what they love to do. And so it starts with what my parents, the example they set.
Yeah, no, it's, you know, along the lines of the Colorado. And when I went to the national program, my parents lived apart for 2 years, mainly because they didn't want me living with a billet family. So my mom moved out to Ann Arbor. They rented an apartment there, and my dad came up on weekends or whenever he could. And that type of dedication where my mom, you know, through those high school years wanted to make sure I was staying on the right track. And, you know, she moved out there with me. Brian, I think, was already at school, so it didn't really matter. Anyways, I'm the favorite, so my mom was going to go anywhere with me anyway. But it's that dedication where, you know, they sacrificed, you know, and I'm sure it wasn't easy on them being apart for 2 years. But they made sure I was comfortable in a time that I needed to be. And, you know, like Brian said, like I'm coaching my daughter and her girls team. You know, I'm driving my son to science camp in the summer and watches the excitement when I pick him up after each day and tell me about the robots he's building there and how he programmed them. I'm like, I don't understand it, but the joy that he shows in it is just incredible. So it goes back to how they brought us up and what they showed us as examples and trying to pass it along to our kids now.
I got a follow-up question to that. So you say, like, seems like your parents are unbelievable, by the way, but so it seems like you said, you know, super loving and caring. What was the like your dad's review of your games? Like, obviously you have both ends of the spectrum where, you know, you have parents who are super hard on their kids and whatnot. For me personally, my dad was my biggest cheerleader, and I've never had a bad game, let alone a bad shift in his eyes. After every single game, I get a text about how I look like Wayne Gretzky out there. I was the best player on the ice. And it is nice, but there's also times.
Wayne Gretzky never dumped the puck.
Exactly.
Pass it out.
Exactly. But no, on a serious note, like there was times where it was really nice and I needed that, but there's also times where I was like, man, stop like bullshitting me here and give me some advice. Like I don't want to be lied to here. I want to be told the truth. And I guess that's a fine line. So I just kind of want to know where your parents lied there, because I've seen both ends of the spectrum. I play with some kids who get some absolutely abusive texts from their parents, and I'm like, dude, how do you perform? How do you perform every night? Like this is insane. So just kind of want to get a read on how you guys were brought up.
I actually talked to my dad recently about that, and I asked him, like, hey, when you asked me after games how you thought I did, whether I had a good game or a bad game, you know, why were you asking that? He's like, 'cause I had no idea about hockey. watching you guys is how I learned, and asking questions after the game about, hey, why'd you make that decision, or why'd you make this decision? Is he was looking for his own knowledge because he didn't understand the game. He wasn't the one that taught us how to skate. I think he got on skates once when the lake froze over and was using the snowbanks to stop himself.
How'd you guys get into it then?
It was, well, I got into it because of my two older brothers, but I believe it was Mom that got Joe and Brian both into it. And, you know, she was the one that was able to skate, you know, taking them out to Gen Valley and getting them on the ice there, and I would tag along. But he mainly asked after games how I thought I played, because he didn't know how I played. He wanted to know how I felt about my game, and then he learned based off asking questions after game. Hey, why'd you make this play? Why'd you do this? What were you thinking here? And then as the years went on is when, you know, he would start giving advice.
Right. Yeah, I still don't think my dad really gets it, but I'm still Gretzky in his eyes, so that's good.
I think it's a little different for everyone, right? So I think your kids are all different. What they need is all different. You have to know their personality. But my mom, she was kind of like your dad, and the sense that her kids can do no wrong. Like everything they do is like the best, you know, like they're awesome, never at fault. So I think my dad was always the quiet type, like Stevie said, that you get in the car, he asked, how'd you feel about it? You would kind of give your take. And then, you know, he would say, you know, he would never lead off. He would never be like, hey, you should have done this, should have done that. Like, what were you thinking here? It was always like, okay, you analyze where you're at, how you played. And then he would either be like, yeah, I agree with you. Or if you're really down on yourself, he'd be like, yeah, but in this instance, you did this, this, and this, and try to pull some positives out of your negative, you know? And if you were real positive on yourself, maybe you'd be like, okay, well, what about on this play? Maybe you could have done something like this, or, you know, could have helped in a certain fashion here. So I think you have to read your kids. With my kids and Stevie for that matter too, right? Like he's coming up behind me in hockey and had a much harder time, I'm sure, confidence-wise, right? Like he's got to try to quote unquote live up to something else, which was bullshit, right? Like you've got to go and play your game, and everybody's different. But he had a lot more pressure than I did, right? Like going into BC or going into the NHL, people were looking at him more than they were looking at me. And so the name kind of maybe hurt his confidence in the sense that, you know, maybe he needed building up at times where another player might need to be humbled, you know? So I think kids are different, and my kids are way different from each other. And sometimes my son needs a confidence boost, right? Like he's down on himself and he needs that extra little bit to get him over the hump and not, you know, be down on himself. He's got to find positives. And my daughter, same thing. Like if she's had a great game, she's feeling good about herself, you can kind of take that time to use some constructive criticism. But when they've had a big mistake, it's about building that person back up. And that's kind of how I've always wanted, you know, things, and treat teammates and how I coach is you have to read the person and what they need at the time. Sometimes it's tough love, and other times it's you need to really build them up and create a little more of a safe zone for them.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm curious, you know, obviously you talked about that, but how much did you two lean on each other kind of during your hockey careers and kind of gaining that competitiveness off of each other? Obviously, Brian, you're a little bit older than Steven is, but obviously being both high-level players, you built that dynamic to where you probably followed one another. And I mean, I'm sure, Brian, you've learned things from Steven, and I'm sure Steven's learned even more from you. So how much of that kind of played a role in both of you growing up and kind of getting ultimately to where you got, and that was playing the X amount of games you both did in the National Hockey League?
Yeah, I mean, it's at home, right? Like working out or pushing each other that way. Even though it's, I don't know, it's like 5 years, it was a big difference from when I started in the league or when I started in college. The strength and conditioning portion, the stuff away from the rink really took off. And it wasn't really there at the beginning of my career, late 90s, early 2000s. It was just starting to become a thing that would give you that edge. And so Stevie had to work much harder than I did. He had to give that little extra. And I don't say it in a mean way. And, he's just as skilled, but like my skill set and things took me a little further, and he had to work harder. He had to grind harder. Like 6 years in the minors before getting an NHL call up. That's not easy mentally. That's not easy physically. That league's a damn good league, and people don't recognize how little it takes, how those little things matter between the AHL and NHL. And he was a forgotten player. 6 years in the AHL. You're basically looking at other job opportunities, other careers, and that's when he made his breakthrough. So I think it speaks to his work ethic, the mental side of the game, being able to stick with it, going to camp after camp, knowing that the new crop of players, new draftees, were the guys they're looking at, and you're just kind of there to fill a spot. And first cuts, you're being sent down to the minors. It's not easy, and I don't know that side of it. I didn't have to grind like he did for that. And so I think that's a special type of player to be able to work through things like that.
Yeah, Steven, I got to ask you about this because we were talking earlier during our little scrimmage this morning, but we kind of had similar paths there at NTDP. And for people that don't know what I'm talking about, it stands for the National Training Development Program. And basically, USA Hockey takes in who they think are the 20 best players at that age group, put them through a 2-year program, their junior and senior year of high school, and basically give them an abundance of resource. Obviously the great coaches, but then, like Brian touched there, you got the strength and conditioning side that's huge at that age. You got a mental skills coach. And then on top of that, you kind of throw them into the best of the best competition. During your first year there, you're playing in the top league, junior league in the U.S. With an international schedule where you get to represent your country, play against the best kids from around the world. And then your second year there, you get tossed into a college schedule, which is actually kind of crazy when you think about it. These kids can be, 6-7 years older. But like I said, it is kind of the best spot from a developmental stage when you look at all the resources. But for myself, and I think that this is going to be the same for you, Steven, correct me when I'm wrong, but you go from Rochester, where you're probably one of the best players, you have the puck on your stick at all times, your development is endless just because you're playing in every situation. And then, obviously you get drawn to NTDP from these huge names. For me, I didn't even think twice. The second they offered me a spot, I didn't think about other options. I was just like, I'm going. And I kind of wish that I waited now, because I went there and kind of got moved down the depth chart. And I feel like you did too. And you were forced to kind of, in order to keep playing, evolve into this bottom six energy PK guy. And that's a tough thing to do at the age of 17, when you're not getting paid to find a role. You just kind of are forced to do it if you want to keep playing. And obviously you went on to have a really fruitful NHL career, that a lot of people would be really jealous of. And I'm sure that has a lot to do with your ability to carve out that role and learn how to play it from an early age. But I guess my question is, do you ever think that maybe if you picked a different route, went to a USHL team, took a few more years in junior, and were that guy where you could play in more situations and kind of keep developing your skill level a little bit more, you think you would have had an even better NHL career?
No, I don't. The short answer is I don't think I would have had. Let's face it, it's a lot harder to make it as a goal scorer in the NHL than it is a bottom six type guy. Now it's harder to stay as a bottom six guy, but it's easier to get there as a goal scorer rather than the bottom six. And saying that, I was 15. Rochester had a junior team for 1 year in the North American League. I played there. The 83s, I got passed over for the first year of the 83s at the U.S. program. I was a sophomore. They were obviously a year ahead in school. We ended up playing them in the North American League, and obviously I play against them, and I try to show my best. The following year, the Rochester team folded. and we had like a dispersal draft. So I got chosen by Cleveland Barons in the North American League. So I was like, all right, I'm set to go to Cleveland. We got an apartment there. My mom was moving there with me as well. I was enrolled in school. I think it was Rocky River. I think that's what it was. National team called. Mike Eves had just taken over as a head coach, and he wanted to bring in a few of his guys. I had originally said no. The first initial phone call was like, no, I'm comfortable going to Cleveland because I knew I was going to be the offensive guy. Like I was with Rochester, even as a 15-year-old, I had Vanek on my line and he was 14. Nice. Yeah. All I did was pass the puck for breakaways and he'd score. So it made me look good. So I originally said no to Cleveland, but then US is like, just come out, just come visit. And back to your point, with all the resources they have, I look at their video room, which was unheard of at the time. I look at their gym that has a boxing ring in it, the shooting room, the specialty coaches with, the mental side of things, the school, the study hall, everything. And I'm like, yeah, I want to come here. So my parents had to cancel the rental in Cleveland, probably lost their deposit, and then get a new apartment in Ann Arbor. But going to the point of, I get there, everyone is the top player in the team they just played. Something's got to give somewhere, right? Someone's got to accept a role that they don't want to. And at 17, being told, hey, you're going to be third line, energy, PK. You're not going to be the go-to guy in the power play. You didn't want to hear it. Like I remember specifically talking to Mr. Eves or Coach Eves. At the time, we had a meeting in his office, and he's like, hey, the only way you're going to make it to NHL is as a fourth-line PKer. You may not even be an every-night type guy, but once you accept that role, you will have a career. 17, that's the last thing you want to hear. Just killed my confidence, right? Like you kill your confidence. But now that I look back, and I tell everyone this, it was probably the most important meeting of my career. And, it took me to BC where I still struggle with identity there. I probably lost out on a full scholarship because of the confidence at the US program. And once I finally accepted it, like, hey, I'm going to have to be a PK guy, block shots, fourth line, play physical. And as a 5'7" guy, playing physical isn't always easy. And then I got an opportunity to play, and the rest is how it played out. But at 17, the last thing you want to hear is, hey, the only way you're making it is a fourth liner. You want to be the guy that goes tough. But right. I look back now, and anyone I talk to, the most important meeting in my career was when I was 17 years old, and I hated it at the time. But I look back now and realize, hey, that was what changed my path in my career to being able to make it to the NHL.
That's awesome.
Cool. I kind of agree with you. Like that's my mentality, and that's kind of my take on that whole situation for Stevie as well, and for other kids. I guess for my son who's 16, same thing. The thought process would be to play in all situations. You're going to get the most development, right? Like people want to rush and at 15, 16 sign on with a school, but the average age is 19 and a half, almost 20 years old for an incoming freshman. So there's a long window. And I think the more you play, the more situations you're in, the better you're going to be. Now, with that being said, everyone who's in the NHL was a top line guy, was a goal scorer, was the best player all growing up. So there are different roles to be had. And so I think both of you bring up good points, but I think Stevie's identity was set when he went to the US program, which could be good and could not be, right? Like he's saying it worked in his favor because he accepted that role and he played that role all the way through his career. And then what would have happened maybe if he was that top guy and developed a little differently? Would he have had a little easier time in pro hockey than he did as far as grinding and finding his way? But I think advice to young people is to play and have that opportunity.
Yeah, and that's what I say too, is like I just think that 16, 17 is way too early to find a role. And you do make a good point of like, if the earlier I guess you can learn that role, because you know, not everyone can be a scorer at the next level, but still, in my opinion, I always say, like, if you're not getting paid, you don't need to find a role. You hear all these kids always saying, you know, I got to be a third liner on my U14 team. And I'm like, it's a little too early to be not playing a lot, you know? So I do think it's kind of an interesting, you know, topic to gnaw on. And I was just curious to kind of get your perspective from too.
I mean, I didn't like it. I was forced to accept it, but I didn't like it. Like, I wanted to be the goal scorer. Like, you want to, you know, you want to be the goal scorer. You want to, and I'm not saying I wouldn't have gotten better and developed better, you know, maybe, but I don't think I would have had the career if I didn't accept that at some point. And it took me a couple of years to realize it.
And it changes, right? Like when I broke into the Devils my first year, it was all Hall of Famers. I mean, you can run the list of Hall of Famers. There was no rookies on the team. Everyone was older. And so I had to fill a role. What was that role at the time? It was third line checking with Madden and Pandolfo, and you're expected to shut down the other team's top line and not get scored against. You're not expected to get shots on goal. You're not expected to get any chances. You're just expected to keep it out of your net. That's how I broke in, and then it evolved from there. But, you know, it's that's why I say everyone who's in the NHL was a top line guy at some point, and you just have to figure out and be best prepared when it comes time to have those role changes.
You're just lucky you had those two guys on your line. They made you look good.
I don't know how to play D. There's no defensive bone in my body.
I was going to say, how did that role go for you? How did you enjoy that?
I didn't mind.
Did you still dump it?
Well, but I didn't mind it because we had Pat Burns was a coach and Larry Robinson. They both like to match lines. So as a third line, we're going all the time. We were playing, you know, 15 to 20 minutes a night in that role. So I didn't mind. We were on the ice. We were getting chances. I just had to wait for my time to get that power play and change that role.
For sure.
Yeah, he didn't have block shots at that time. He had 2 block shots his entire career. 2 block shots. One hit him in the face. One hit him in the leg, broke his leg. But they were both in front of the offensive zone net. There was no guy.
That's a tough stat. One off the face, one broken leg. I wouldn't block a shot after that either.
Yeah. Oh, and don't forget, I had a broken foot. Same thing in front of the offensive zone net. Yeah. Nice. So Kevin Constantine, he coached me in New Jersey. He was in for like half a season. He came in. He had foam pucks. We did a drill where you had to block shots with these foam pucks in practice. So, I mean, mind you, Scotty Stevens, Niedermeyer, and those guys are probably rolling their eyes and motherfucking this guy like this. We're doing this drill. I'm going out. I can't block any of these foam pucks. He comes up to me after practice. He's like, "You had the worst shot blocking technique in the world." And I go, "That's because Marty Brodeur is behind me. He wants to see the puck. I'm not supposed to stop it. Let him do his job." Not me.
Dude, I've had goalies who say that. They're like, "Man, I don't want you getting in front of the shot from out far. Like, I'd rather just see it in, you know?"
Yeah, if you're not
that works great with me.
If you're not going to block it, get out of the way. Yeah, if you're not going to block it, get out of the way. That's how I always told my D-man when I played at RIT. Get out of the way or block it.
Don't screen me here.
Yeah, don't flamingo. Do their job at some point too.
Exactly. Make them earn their money.
Yeah.
So kind of circling back to the intangible side of things, you know, it's tough to kind of determine, like, is this something that can be developed and like something that can be learned, or is it something that's just ingrained in your soul? And we talked about kind of your upbringing, and we know you came from a great family that put great values in you guys, and it helped you along the way. You know, we talked to our younger kids that we work with, and obviously all the way up through how important character is. And I think it's important when you're looking at, like, you could be the hardest worker, the best person, you could be humble, and you could still like never make it anywhere, right? But what we talk about is if you can take a good player and then add these values, they can potentially add a level to their success. So, you know, just kind of wrapping it back to that, like how have you guys seen like the intangibles? Like, your character, your upbringing, all things like that. How have you seen that get you through hard times? So specifically, playing in the NHL and the game. So from Steven, it might be like grinding it out in the minors before he gets up and making it a long run in the NHL. And for Brian, like being a captain on NHL teams that, saw success sometimes, but, even, with Buffalo, you guys, had some tough times. And like, how did you see your intangibles work for you when you saw potentially other people that didn't have those characteristics go the other direction?
Yeah, I mean, for me, if you group all the intangibles into, when you get to that level, right? Like you want to be pro or college for that matter, you can include it into there. It's about, we hear people say, you need to be a good pro. You need to be professional. Well, what does that mean? Those are all the intangibles that you're talking about. That's getting to the rink early to prepare yourself. That's doing the extra little bit in the summer, maybe when you don't want to. It's watching that video of shifts. It's all these little things that matter. And for me, you can group character and kindness into that too, right? It's walking into the locker room, and when your laundry's hung for you and cleaned for you, you're thanking the guy that did that. That was up till 3 a.m. cleaning your laundry, hanging your wet equipment for you, getting all your stuff ready. So when you get to the rink, you don't have to think about that. That's about giving that guy the respect that everyone else in the room should have, because they're just as big a part as the guy that's going on the ice and doing the job. It's about, you can bring it back to family, my wife and my kids, them sacrificing them. If she's having a bad day and the kids suck and I'm on the road enjoying a nice steak dinner and wine, she's not bitching about it. And she's allowing me to go and play my game and then have a more stable career, or maybe have a better game because I don't have those layers of stress that have been built up. Like there's all sorts of things that contribute to the player on the ice that people don't think about. And so when I was captain, those were the things that I really tried to teach guys is how to be a pro and how you treat people at the rink, away from the rink, how you come to work, because it is a job. You got to come prepared. You have to come accepting of your putting in your time, and you're here to do a job. Like you said, I ran the gamut of New Jersey. That was a well-oiled machine. Lou kind of set the tone for everything, and everyone kind of fell in line. So I was lucky to have that early in my career. And then, Montreal was just the epitome of all that, right? Like mixed with the fan base, the organization top-notch, and guys knowing how to do things. That was easier to be captain in the sense that the daily grind of those things wasn't there. And then you get to Buffalo and things were just not where they needed to be. Those were the things that I thought I could come in and help change. And that was the reason for signing there, is to have that kind of purpose at the end of my career. And unfortunately, there just weren't enough guys to buy into that and the right character and upbringing, right? Like it was a very selfish setup room in the sense that guys wanted what they wanted when they wanted it. And, there was no humbleness or, the guys that are doing the stuff behind the scenes, the way they treat people, the trainers and the equipment people, it just wasn't there. And that's the reason why you see where they are still today, is because it's hard to get that out of your room and out of your organization. So if I could do that, those were the things that I saw throughout my career that really showed the difference of those daily habits. The chef that's cooking you stuff, how are you treating that guy? Like if he messes up your eggs that morning, are you giving him shit over it? Like, he's a person too, and he's helping you be the best person you can be.
Yeah. I think being adaptable on top of that stuff, right? You look at Brian talked about the start of his career and how training, nutrition, everything has changed from that start. When Brian broke in the league, I'm pretty sure guys were still smoking darts between periods.
That's outrageous.
They were.
Guys are out there smoking darts between periods, but now you get to the point where it's a 24/7 job, whether it's a summer, the season. Like, nutrition is just as important as, you know, what you're doing on the ice, because that's what makes your body work. And I think that adapting over the course of your career with the training as well. You know, I look at my diet from my first training camp to my last training camp, and it's, you know, what I think was healthy then was nothing compared to how I adapted throughout my career, and being able to do that. Cool.
I was grabbing a 2-week granola bar on the way to the rink for breakfast in the early 2000s. That was my breakfast.
I got to ask, because I heard this in Brian, I might be making you a little too old here, but I forgot who told me. I think it was one of my assistant coaches, but he was telling me that they legit would go out to dinner and, like, on the dessert menu was a pack of darts. Like, that was an option. Is there any
it wasn't darts, you know, cigars for sure. You know what I mean? Like, you go to the places, cigars were, you know, that was part of it. But Stevie's not wrong. Like, Malakoff and guys like that I played with in Jersey are legit smoking cigarettes.
That's absurd, man. That's so crazy. Like, that wasn't that long ago to have that. That's crazy.
No, it was, Stevie. It is what it is, I guess. You know, but you did have to.
Whatever gets you through.
What's that?
I said, whatever gets you through.
Yeah.
Whatever works. But so back onto, like, a little bit more serious of a thing here. I'm a big psyche guy, and, you know, always trying to get a read on how guys think. So, Brian, this question's for you, kind of, because as I was looking through your stats there, especially your BC stats, and I know Mikey was chomping at the bit at that stat. Give me the stat there in 4 years. How many points?
232 collegiate points, which is the most absurd thing. I never knew that about you.
Yeah, that's for people that don't know college hockey. Not to pump his tires too much, but that is pretty unreal. But my big question is, you know, I've always struggled to kind of make the jump from whatever league I go to, whether it was, obviously we touched earlier on going from minor hockey to NTDP or NTDP to college. I kind of always had this a little bit of kind of deer in the headlights when I first get in there. I had, you know, a couple of years to kind of figure it out, especially jumping into pro in the American League. Like, I really struggled coming out of there, and took me a way to find my groove there. But for you, looking at your numbers, I mean, you just stepped in and put up numbers and had success right away. And I do think that's a huge characteristic of highly successful people, is their ability to have confidence when they make a jump, whether it's in athletics or it's in the real world where you take a job promotion or whatnot. But your ability to kind of have confidence, hit the ground running, and kind of skip that experimental phase is huge. So, bringing it back, I just want to know if you think you have a different mindset making this jump than the average Joe, or what when it comes to that.
I'm not quite sure how to phrase it, in the sense that I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if it's the upbringing that I always had to work for what I got. I always had to make a name for myself. I was never the guy that they were looking at. You know, all through, whether it's listen, I played on national teams, I played on world junior teams, I played everywhere. And so you would think that, you know, I had it kind of easy, in the sense that it was, that it came easy, that I was the guy that they were looking at. Everything I did, I was the last cut for the world junior team. You know, Coach Jackson said, listen, I'm taking a chance on you. I think you can play at this level, but some other people are saying that, you know, you can't. And then you go out and you're the leading scorer of the World Juniors. You know, I just had an innate confidence in what I could do and what I could bring. And so I don't know if it came from that kind of little bit of a chip on my shoulder, but I did. I went in knowing that I was able to play at that level. I was able to go in and dominate and be a force at that level. I'm not quite sure where it came from. It was just, I've always had that little bit of self-confidence, knowing that I could go in there and do it. And that's when I touched earlier on difference between me and Stevie. I don't know if it's from development. I don't know if it's from the paths that we went through to get to pro hockey. You know, and I just had that confidence right away where, you know, I think he went in a little tentative at times and was like, okay, I think I can play here. And then he finds his groove, like you said, and can take off from there. It's just something that I always had, I guess, knowing that I could go in and be that guy. So I'm not quite sure where it comes from or how to pin it, what to pin it on, but it certainly is. I always had that belief that I could go and do it. Everything, I guess, my parents say everything in my life, that's how I was. I'd never ridden a dirt bike. I went out and did it first time. Driving, like at 14, 15, I had confidence that I could drive. Like it's just those types of things that I just always had confidence in myself. I'm not quite sure where it comes from.
Must be nice.
And then Steven too, like that last deal you signed, I remember, you know, what a big deal that was for you. And like, what was your role with that deal? And, you know, how much do you think the Intangibles played a role in that?
It was huge. I mean, so the year before I dealt with 2 major injuries, which ended up being my second last year pro. I was the last cut out of Islanders camp. First game of the season in Bridgeport, I tore my meniscus in my knee. Never had any injury in my career, nothing. Opted no surgery because they didn't think it would be successful. And I wasn't about to take out my meniscus and deal with a long-term injury at that point in my career either, right? Like the arthritis that could come by taking it out and the bone-on-bone rubbing later on in my life played a factor into that. Then I rehabbed that, come back for about 5 games and tear my labrum from my shoulder. Dislocated it, tore it, put off surgery, you know, until both teams were out of playoffs. I'm like, okay, you know, this is not how I want to end. I'll get the surgery, rehab it. Well, when you get surgery, you miss half a season with injuries and then get surgery, teams aren't really lining up at the door to sign you. So we had been talking to the Islanders all summer and Lou was just taking over. And the agreement was I'm going to camp with the Islanders to be in an NHL camp because other teams are more willing to sign you or take you on than you sitting at home. So I was essentially going to Islanders camp to go to another team. And Barry Trotz came in. It was his first year, the hardest in 13 years pro. His day 1 training camp was the hardest I've ever had.
I can testify that it was horrible.
I couldn't move. I couldn't move for a week. Like it was awful.
It was the first time in my life that I've actually come back to the board when they're explaining another drill, and in my head been like, what are the repercussions if I quit right now? And I consider myself extremely mentally tough. A lot of that has to do with NTDP, but not one word of a lie. I'm sitting there being like, dude, what, like, am I done? Am I going home? Like, I think I might have to tap. They are so hard, man.
It was like after 45 minutes, he brings you to the board and you're like, oh, thank God it's over. Like you're done. He's like, oh no, the other sheet on the other side is nice and fresh. We're going to move over there for another 45 minutes. Wait, we're not done. It's like, this isn't over yet. This pain's got to continue. Anyways, so I go into their camp and apparently made an impression on Barry and whatnot. And, you know, camp's winding down and, you know, Steve Bartlett had called and said, listen, there's a couple American League teams that want to sign you now. But Lou had said, listen, just trust me. Just stick with me. Trust me. We get to the last day of camp. He's like, I can keep you for, I think, 10 days into the season. He's like, trust me. So I turned down a guarantee with another team, knowing that if I signed there, my NHL career was done, right? Like it was an American League deal. I knew I wasn't getting called up again. And I was 4 games shy of 300 at that point. So I'm like, you know what? This is my best opportunity to get there. Sure enough, you know, I trust in Lou, and 10 days into the season, and I haven't even really skated with the team at this point. They had an injury. They signed me to a 2-way, and they're like, by the way, you're playing in Nashville tomorrow. I was like, oh, okay. I haven't skated with the team in about a week. I've been skating on my own. So they kind of threw me in, and that's how I signed my last deal. Is I went into camp with the knowledge that I'm going to another team, and they offer me a deal. And they were up front with me saying, hey, you're going to be the call-up guy. but you're not going to play in Bridgeport either. We're going to play the younger guys. So if you're down there, you have to use practices and as your games, because we're going to call you up even if you haven't played a game. And sure enough, I play in Nashville, go on waivers, whatever, go down. 2 weeks later, they call me up. I hadn't played a game in Bridgeport yet. And they throw me into the lineup the next day. And I end up being up for almost 2 months. And I thankfully got the 300 in that. And, but they told me, it's like, hey, use practice as your games, because I got called up again later in the year. But it wasn't an easy one to stay.
I think it says so much about who you are as a person.
Exactly.
Man. Like, you know what I mean? Agreed. People aren't going to stick their neck out for just anyone. And I think if any lesson is to be learned from you two and your careers, obviously there's an insane amount of talent, but like the intangibles matter so much. And like, we try to stress that to the kids, and you guys are such good examples for young kids everywhere, but especially in our area in Rochester and Buffalo. And, I just think like that is such a testament to who you are as a person, that they went that far to get you in that position. So
I somehow got a raise out of it too.
There you go.
I got a raise.
Finally got rid of that. Remember that one truck you used to drive into the workouts at RIT? The boys would give it to you, and then after that deal, you had the new whip going.
What truck was that, Stevie?
That was a Tahoe.
I was going to say that.
Brian gave me.
What a guy!
Said the payment.
Whoa.
Hold on. He said the payment for the truck would be fix the dent in the passenger side of the car. Well,
listen.
Well, when I went into my first year with Long Island, so I drove that car for 10 years, that Tahoe for 10 years. I never fixed a dent in the passenger side, so I just got a free car out of it.
Listen,
it's his mistake for giving it to me.
I told him he's in the minors, he's scrapping away, he doesn't have the money to buy a car. I was getting a new one. I'm like, listen, you can have this. We'll do deferred payment. You don't have to. I'll be the finance. You pay me back.
This was, hey,
it's been 20 years. I haven't seen a dime yet over it.
Oh boy, this actually sets it up good for my next question, because I saw an article that said that you two, like when you would come out of games when you both were playing, that the first person, everyone goes and checks box scores and see people's stats or whatever. And obviously you guys would go and check each other's stats first before you went anywhere else. So I got to know from a non-bullshit perspective, because I know when I go to, even when I check in on some of my buddies, like obviously I'm happy for them. And you guys being brothers, you're probably happy for them. But sometimes when you see your buddy or your brother have a big night, you get a little bit anxiety of being like, dude, I gotta pick it up here. Like, fuck, I gotta go out and if he had 2 goals, I gotta go out and try to have a hat trick next game. That's never happened, the hat trick part. But you know what I'm talking about. So I just want to know, like, as a competitive brothers and siblings there, like, what's your gut reaction when the one has a big night? Are you generally pumped for him, or are you pissed?
So before Brian goes in,
I know they're talking about the goals. I was overzealous about myself too.
So I don't know that feeling. I don't think. I mean, when I look at the stat line, and I'm looking at block shots and time on ice and maybe pens.
How many hits?
I was never like, oh, he had 5 block shots, I should have been there. Like, it's,
I'm getting out of the way of that puck because he's out for another 3 weeks.
Well, we do have something
more for Stevie, I guess.
Oh, that's too funny.
We know that you guys are 2 of the most competitive guys in the world, and being able to train you guys at the end of your careers, literally what an awesome time. The amount of shit you guys talk to each other made it so much fun. But we just put a new picture in the gym here recently, and you guys know that we have pictures of all of our pros up along the walls, and we just put a new one up for Steve, and I don't know if you guys have seen this yet.
I haven't been in
a little bit.
Here it is, boys. Here it is.
Who's the tech guy? There you go.
Wow. So, this is the
wait, really fast before you go on, just for for listeners who can't see this right now, it's a picture of Steven dummying somebody on the Bruins with a picture of Brian's face over top of it.
So
I didn't know you hit that hard, Steven.
Oh, that's the only thing I did.
Oh my god!
He was allowed on the ice like twice in his career against me. I think we have pictures of both of them.
Ask what happened when he moved to the Sabres, though.
What happened when you moved to the Sabres?
My career went to shit.
No. So knowing that you guys are pretty competitive guys, we have a question. So, what's better? One ring as a player or two as a scout? Congrats to Stevie, just getting his second with Tampa. What do we think, boys?
I mean, he definitely wins the numbers game. There's no doubt about it.
But I have 1 loss as a player in the finals and 2 wins. So as a scout, I'm 2-1 in the finals. I mean,
there we go.
I'm 2-1. Brian, I will say though, my 1 ring makes his look like a class ring.
Yeah.
Really? Is it? I wish you guys brought him on here. You look like you got yours close, Brian.
No, mine's up in the. I mean, mine's at the house. Yeah, I can grab it. But it literally, when no joke, Stevie brought his over to the house, and the kids wanted to see both of them. It looks like a high school graduation ring compared to Steven's. Like it's like you go and get your class ring from high school.
That's crazy.
And like at the time, yours was the go-to.
I mean, I think mine was sick before. Now,
yeah,
I need to upgrade.
Well, boys, again, I cannot thank you guys enough for taking the time. It just says so much about you guys that you would take the time to come on. And again, this isn't about us. Like we want to help people, chase those edges and reach their goals. And when we talk to people that we work with, how important these things are, like you guys are living examples of that. So, could not be more grateful that you took the time and that you guys are awesome examples for the people out there.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us on,
boys. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. And to everyone who took the time to listen today and listen to episode 3, we greatly appreciate you guys as well. So we'll be back next week with another edition of Chasing Edges. On behalf of Cole and Nader, I'm Dirty Mike. Thanks again for listening, everybody.